So, like, The Boys, what are we doing? We got 4 episodes left. We're this close to the end of the show. We're having the characters do a little bottle episode. That's right, we're talking about episode 4 of season 5 of The Boys, the final season. This episode was called King of Hell. Interesting name. And I want to talk about it because there's a lot going on in this episode. Some of it worked for me, and for the first time this season, some of it really didn't. And I want to talk about all those parts. I'm going to rank them. I made a ranking of the top 7 plot lines in this week's episode of The Boys. I'm going to go through them one by one. Also, my cat Mortimer, sitting right next to me in his little cat chair, he loved this episode of The Boys because it referenced
Toxoplasmosis. It's a parasite in cat. It can infect humans.
Which is a real thing, and probably explains like 90% of my personality. Alright, so big picture stuff. This felt like a season 3 episode, not because it was filmed like season 3 or characters were having season 3 problems, but just because it did not seem like the kind of episode you would get in the final season of the show. Partially because it felt like we were focusing on some things that definitely weren't that important, and we will talk about all of them. We'll say picking an MVP for this episode, something I've done the whole time and always been doing, so don't go back and check. But the way we'll cover this, I'm going to start at the top of my best plot lines of the episode, and we're going to drill down to the ones at the bottom. So I will say, like I've probably done before because I do this every week, I'm going to give the MVP to 2 separate people, because there were 2 separate plot lines that I did kind of like. My first goes to Tim Daly, who played Rick, Annie's up until now never before seen biological father. I thought that performance was great. I'd love to see Tim Daly and stuff. For people that don't know, if you had a moment in your head and you were like, what is going on? Like I'm hearing this man say things about truth and justice. I'm like, what does this feel so familiar? It's because Tim Daly was one of the 2 Supermen from the Timiverse. And that is the DC animated universe from the 90s, which was produced by artist and animator Bruce Timm. In it, there were apparently 2 Supermen. I did not know this. I thought there was just the one. But there was George Newbern, who did Superman through most of the Justice League material. But then before that, you had Tim Daly. And once you know that, you go back, listen to him talk about Starlight and what's right and standing up for what you believe in.
But what Vought's been making us do, pulling people out of their homes, you know it's wrong.
It's like, oh my god, yeah, that's Superman. And I think this plot line almost completely worked. And like, this is what I kind of expect from an episode late in the final season. Like closure for a character. We're exploring things. Maybe we heard a little bit of the story of now we're going to get the full picture and it's going to tell us something new about our characters. And in this case, the world, which I thought was really helpful. Because we've seen the extremes of the Boys-averse, right? We've seen people on the Boys who are incredibly pro Homelander. And then the other side, we've seen people that are rebelling against Homelander and against Vought. You know, we've seen the people that have been targeted by Vought, like the raids from episode 2. But what we don't see a lot of are the people in the middle who are not comfortable with what Vought is doing, but there's not really a lot they can do, so they kind of play along. And they all live in this weird space where no one can fully explain what's happening because of how precarious the situation is. Which is something that you hear about a lot when it comes to fascist regimes. There's obviously a lot of extremes, but there are a lot of other people who don't feel like they can fight back against the regime, but at the same time don't agree with it, know it's wrong, or waiting for someone to do something about it. In this case, that someone is Starlight, and everybody else, all the other protagonists on the show. But yeah, I was worried when it was like, oh, Starlight's gonna go meet her dad, and she doesn't really know what that's gonna be like. Because my first thought is, oh, he's gonna be bad. He's going to be ashamed of her, or he's going to be a supervillain himself. And when you see him and he's not excited to see her, you're like, oh, this is something. Then the wife is really friendly, and you notice the Homelander sign on their front yard. You're like, oh, I see how this is going to go. I've seen X-Men too. They're all secretly bad, and they called the cops. And the cops are going to come. Starlight's going to have to fight them. And that is somewhat true, because her brother did do that. But in reality, what we got is a character in Rick who has a pretty complicated moral code. When he says, oh, I always call it sick when they're doing the raids, and Starlight's like, yeah, but other people do those raids. You can kind of see a little bit of the contradiction in him. But at the same time, when you find out why he left Annie and her mom, you could see how complicated something like that would be. And you could sort of empathize with him in a way that you almost never can with this kind of character, the dad who left town. And even having watched the episode a couple times, I really don't even know what the right thing for him to have done was. You know, her mom put her in this really weird position, but one that she thought would be helpful for Annie to get her out of poverty, to give her a chance at a great life. But then, as this hero worship got intertwined with religion, made Annie's mom convince Annie that she got the powers from God, and her dad couldn't deal with that. Because it's not just about saving a child from being potentially abused. Because it's not as cut and dry as normal abuse. It's a matter of perspective. Oh, is she a god? Is that what she believes? And, you know, as we'll see later in this episode, some people clearly do. but more than that, to actually fight back against this system. And we see Rick talking about this in the present day, but the system is just too big and too powerful that if you did try to take a shot at it, you would put yourself and your family, which at that point includes Annie, in danger. Who's to say Rick doesn't try to take her away in a move that you could definitely justify as like a good move, but because Vought and Homelander hear about it, they just kill them both. So what's he supposed to do? I think that's really interesting. I like the idea that he's proud of her, and I like the idea that their relationship being mended gave her an opportunity to mend her relationship with Huey, which, I'll be completely honest, they make a big deal in this episode out of the fact that she left Huey, and whenever that happened, which I assume was last week, I just totally did not track that. At least it didn't seem like that big of a deal. But setting her back on the right path, forcing her to understand what she values, perfect move. And yeah, seeing these deputies talk about what they're doing, these are conversations that happen a lot, and there is a certain breaking point where people just can't take it, and that would be a cool end to this show, one that would be kind of sad because Homelander would just kill them all. But like, if everybody was just like, no, we don't want to do it, that would be a cool end to this show, especially since it seems like it's going to be like Billy Butcher and Homelander fighting in the sky like Superman and Zod, when in reality the real conflict is between Homelander and the people who just refuse to love him. Seeing them fully reject him, I think, is the one thing we need to get this season. And we're getting a little bit of it, and we're starting to really feel those gears turning. With you have A-Train rejecting Homelander, and you have Ashley wanting to fight against Homelander. You have these deputies now. The more power Homelander gets, obviously, as Butcher will say, the less happy he is, but also the more people cannot ignore the fact that he is a problem. But anyway, everything about the Annie family thing, I loved it. Thought it was great. Could have been the whole episode, as far as I'm concerned. However, and obviously we're going to give Tim Daly one of the MVPs for the probably manyth week in a row. The other MVP this episode is Firecracker, Valerie Curry. It's just great. Everything Firecracker does this episode is fun. I don't think like every joke in all the Firecracker bits land, but every one of her jokes lands, and I think now she is facilitating something really interesting. Because without this character, we would not be able to bridge the superhero to god status that Homelander is so interested in. He may have deluded himself enough to think he is a god, but he wouldn't be able to manipulate the situation the way that Firecracker can. I also think Valerie Curry, just very funny in this episode. So number 2 plotline this week is the Homelander God plotline. Now, people brought this up last week. It is wild that the week Homelander got really, really interested in religion was the same week that Trump started fighting with the Pope. And during this episode, you see Firecracker trying to figure out how to position Homelander in the Church of America, which already is way too good. But then she's like, I know what we call him. And in my head, I'm sure there are other people that thought this too. It's like, oh my God, are they going to call him the Pope? Did they not just call the kind of American authoritarianism fighting with religion, but specifically American authoritarian president figure fighting with Pope? Like, what a world. Turns out to be Prophet. Doesn't feel like what Homelander wants to be, right? Prophets are not gods. And I do think that's going to be maybe a strange conversation to have, because Homelander wants to be all-powerful. He believes he needs to be as important and as powerful as Jesus. Jesus isn't a prophet. I don't know if Pope is better than Prophet. They're probably, similar levels. But Homelander wants to be a god, and I'm not convinced this is going to be enough for him. Firecracker had some great line reads, especially in the beginning. Homelander telling her that he has had a vision and he is going to be the new god, and her greeting that with,
congrats.
Great. And then when he's saying she's going to tell everybody, her kind of ...
How?
Love it. Valerie Curry is very funny. I think this cast is very strong overall, very funny. There are only a couple of characters that are part of the main cast now that haven't been there for a very long time. I'd say the big 4 are Sister Sage, Firecracker, Soldier Boy, and then Oh Father. And all those characters are very important, and I really enjoy what Soldier Boy is doing. We'll talk about him later. And like Sister Sage, I think should be a more interesting character than she usually is. But Firecracker is the character that I feel like really does give the show something new. Really does feel like the logical next step for pretty much all these guys. For America, for religion, for the soups. I love all the whiteboarding and brainstorming that Firecracker is leading, where they're trying to figure out what the canon of the Homelander religion is. Some fun little details on that board. Only God there ever was. Jesus is wrong there. And then the Satan, org chart is DEI, trans athletes, and then Starlight. Which, it is the exact kind of perfect stupid joke that the show does really well. Where like on one hand it's very heavy-handed, but on the other hand, there are definitely multiple Facebook groups where people have that org chart written down, but instead of Starlight it says AOC or something. And I like this idea because A, this feels like something the actual America will maybe have to reckon with in the future, but B, like this is the really only next step for this character. He is the president, he has all the power, and again, like Butcher says, he won't be happy, he's never going to be happy. At least not by collecting more power. But in the Boys-averse, the only person more powerful than the president is the head of the church. And another thing I really love about Firecracker is, on one hand, she does seem genuinely really into religion. Like, to some extent, we know she's playing a part, right? When she met Sister Sage for the first time, she explained that. But on the other hand, this is one of those things that this character does feel uncomfortable about. And a character who has been ride or die pretty much the entire way. Like, since she joined the team, there's been very little that she not only will not do, but doesn't feel comfortable doing. But maybe because she seems to really believe in God, she's going to have to square this difficulty. She's going to have to square the fact that Homelander is clearly having a psychotic break. And as this Church of America starts doing things that are bad, maybe that'll be how she finally turns. Because I do think pretty much every character knows Homelander's out of his mind, but none of them can do anything about it. The only one that kind of felt like maybe she didn't was Firecracker. Now we're seeing that fall away. So that's the number 2 plotline I liked. The Homelander is a god now plotline. My third favorite plotline was the Homelander and Soldier Boy excursion. First of all, and this feels like it's important and something that it's easy to forget about in this episode, Sister Sage is the reason that Soldier Boy goes with Homelander. For a character who is this genius master manipulator, we have not really seen her doing much genius master manipulating. Or at least we haven't seen it being done for something specific. In the beginning of the season, they introduced the idea that Sister Sage just likes living a nice life and attention and being happy. She's getting that from working with Homelander on the 7, but this is one of the first times she's like, maybe she is trying to destroy this from within, and if she was, this would be a smart move. So the Homelander Soldier Boy stuff specifically that I liked, just had to do with them arguing. You know, these characters just hate each other. We didn't even need to put them in the evil forest for them to act on that hate, because it's such a big part of their relationship. Part of why I love this team is they're both just very funny. Soldier Boy is very funny. Him calling all the clearly ominous dead bodies
a couple of uggos
is funny. Him not wanting to be flown by Homelander is funny. The idea that him and Homelander both hooked up with Liberty, very strange. And not even just because she is probably Homelander's mom, right? We know that the same way Soldier Boy's sperm was used to create Homelander, the egg also came from a powerful soup and was implanted into random woman. And based on the soups that were available at the time, it was probably Stormfront. It's weird to see Homelander use that against Soldier Boy, because Homelander feels kind of slighted by the fact that Soldier Boy slept with Firecracker. It feels like he has to one-up him. But it just goes to show, like, I do think Homelander will go down as one of the most Oedipal characters of all time. And by Oedipal, I mean like Oedipus. And that he has the perfect blend of mommy and daddy issues to destroy his life and the lives of everyone around him. But speaking of mommy and daddy issues, and speaking of Liberty/Stormfront, I do want to touch on something that Soldier Boy said that I thought was very interesting this week. When Soldier Boy asks about Stormfront, Homelander says,
suicide,
which up until now was true. In the end of season 2, Homelander has the very burnt up and nearly dead Stormfront, but then, in the beginning of season 3, we find out that she bit off her tongue and choked on it and died, which is plausible at the time, because these guys were not immortal. It seems like some of them were definitely living longer than you would expect, but nobody was talking about V1 back then. Everybody just assumed that was something that could happen. She could die. Now that we're talking about immortality, Soldier Boy bring up the question of like, what are you talking about? She can't die. Did you see a body? And you're reminded like, no, we never did. I didn't expect we'd see more Stormfront this season, but now I'm like, yeah, she's probably out there. And because these guys can heal, and we saw how well Homelander heals in just this episode, why wouldn't she be able to heal from her injuries? And there's a lot that's going on in this episode with a certain plot line, and we'll get to it, but I thought that idea was interesting. The other idea that I thought was extremely interesting this episode is the idea that apparently this whole time, and by this whole time, I mean since back in the day, like since the days of Soldier Boy, there was a facility that had uranium and something called, Soldier Boy uses this term specifically, a soup-proof cell. And it seems like in that moment, Soldier Boy's like, I'm going to kill Homelander just because I kind of want to, and this is a way to do that. It is wild, considering how many seasons our characters have been trying to kill soups, and how many times specifically Homelander has managed to evade capture, and no one, not even Stan Edgar, has ever brought up the fact that they have a cage that you can keep Homelander in, and sure, he breaks out of it eventually. Maybe that's because Soldier Boy just leaves him there. And if you did other things to kill him, like suck the air out of the room or shot him, maybe he'd just die. And I thought like the V1 felt pretty Horcruxy, like, oh yeah, no, this is that thing that was like this the whole time, don't worry, and this is the main plot of the show. The idea that there are like rooms that can hold superheroes, including Homelander, and possibly kill him, that's a very strange development. I imagine this season won't end with Homelander being put in one of those things and dying. Honestly, it felt like that only existed for the same reason that Soldier Boy wouldn't let Homelander fly him, which is so that everybody wouldn't get there at the same time, so that the boys could have their little thing going on in the basement. Those two guys could be fighting, and then they could split up, and Soldier Boy could go do his thing. It's just a lot of kind of, seems like plot contrivances, unless they have a plan for the radioactive chamber, and it's gonna come up again. I think it's wild to introduce that so late into the game. So that's my third favorite plotline. It's not perfect, but I enjoyed it. Now our fourth favorite plotline. This is right in the middle, and unfortunately, this is the boys. I just felt like most of what they were doing this week was kind of nothing. It was a bottle episode, but it was also a red kryptonite episode, which like green kryptonite makes you weak, red kryptonite makes you act strange, usually aggressive, uninhibited. And that's what we got here. It was one of those, characters finally saying the things that they never said to each other, getting this all out. It didn't work for me for a couple of reasons. One, they always do this. There are shots in the previously on for this episode that are just them saying what they're going to say later under the influence of the evil tree guy. So that's weird. The only thing this really added was now characters who don't usually fight each other, like Butcher and Kimiko, or MM and Huey, got to finally fight. Although that was something I never really cared about. And again, like, these are all things that all of these characters always know and say. If this happened in season 2, I'd say, wow, that's a kind of interesting moment. That's really going to affect the balance of this team. I don't know if they'll be able to be friends forever. But now it's like, they're all going to be dead at the end of the season. They all kind of hate each other. Like, I don't think we need this. I will say, like, I think everybody did a good job. All the actors were doing a good job. I liked Frenchie this episode, Tomer Capone. He's not usually my favorite character, but I think what he was doing was fun. It felt kind of like pointless in that most of what he was doing until the very end was just saying, don't fight everyone, be quiet, Homelander can hear you. And it's like, Homelander can hear you from across the state. There's no way Homelander isn't hearing this. Even locked in the chamber, I would say he can hear it. But definitely before he gets in the chamber, he's hearing everybody around him. And you can maybe say, oh, maybe he's distracted by all the stuff with his dad. Probably, but then don't have Frenchie just stand there and go, be quiet, everyone, because it's just kind of nothing. I do like the confrontation between Team Huey and Team Genocide of kill all the soups versus don't, because I do find that dilemma interesting. This far into the series, it is clear that soups are bad for the world. Right, like Stan Edgar says, like, there'll be something else. There's always something else. Maybe. But the same way that nukes are bad for the world in a new way, and like it created a possibility for destruction that just did not exist before, I would say you can make the argument that soups are that. And obviously the much bigger issue is Vought and capitalism and the system that benefits from them all acting like monsters. But the case for not only we don't want any of these guys to be immortal, but we just don't want them to exist anymore, I get. And maybe it's just because of the Annie plotline that I'm starting to see a version of this world after Homelander. A world that could exist with the superheroes not all being dead, but with Vought just fully destroyed. And I think that is interesting. Also, I do just enjoy watching Billy Butcher. I love his little head tilt when he says 90% of a sentence, but then that last 10 sentence, he tilts his head up a little bit. Like, that's fun and something he seemed to invent for the show, and I love it. I also think it's really weird that during this episode, Huey shoots MM, and I don't remember seeing the fallout of that. Maybe I'm misremembering it, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry for all that stuff. But I mean, MM just got shot in, like, around the heart area. So, I don't know, that just seemed like maybe it would be a bigger deal than the show treats it like. There were some lines in this episode that I didn't love. I'm calling The Last of Us.
No, that is just The Walking Dead with mushrooms.
Like, I don't know. I like when the show references things in its universe more than things like in our universe. Like talking about a specific show, I don't know, it just felt like a little too cute. But here's why I don't think this plotline worked for me. A, Starlight wasn't in it. She's like a main character and she just was not able to be part of this. So much so that she says, oh, I'm sorry I left. And then Stewie says, no, it's good you weren't here. This was a day to skip. And then it's like, okay, well, this was a good day for her to skip. Was it a good day for us to skip? Because I frankly don't think I learned anything new about any of these characters. At least not the characters that are part of the boys. Except I do have a little asterisk here next to the 4 because I think the Frenchie Kimiko development this episode was great. I love the idea that they have to break up because Frenchie was obviously important in Kimiko's journey of self-discovery, and they both obviously have a lot in common. But I don't know, I just find that very mature on a show like this to have two characters just say, you know what, we're kind of incompatible when you really get down to it, and just kind of get that. What I most read from that is Frenchie's gonna die soon. I don't think this character is going to survive very long. I also don't think maybe Kimiko is. Like, Kimiko wants to have a family, she wants to have a future. Frenchie doesn't have anything specific in mind. It seemed like most of his future was tied up in Kimiko. Now that she's not necessarily going to be a part of it, it's like, well, I don't know. Like, originally in the season, I was like, well, MM should be a character who I'm like, well, he's not going to die because he has a family. But the family's been such a non-entity this season that it's almost like maybe they're not getting into that part of the story because they do plan to kill him. I don't know. Frenchie feels like now he has jumped to the top of that list of characters that are going to die. I mean, underneath Billy, of course, and Homelander, but good guys that are going to die. All right, so this is number 4. 5. Now we're in ones I didn't like. Ryan and Butcher, I just did think that was very interesting. Again, I said this last week, this Harry and the Hendersons thing of like, you're not even cool, you're not even a good son, and then he runs away, and it's like, I had to tell him that because I'm such a bad person. It would be wrong for him to be around me. It just feels like it hasn't gone anywhere. And it also feels like the character of Ryan is currently kind of aimless. Like, what does he want? It isn't like Homelander, but it isn't like Butcher. It isn't even like superheroes generally. And this character is like maybe the most important part of the entire series. Like, Ryan existing changed everything. And the fact that we're this far into it and I'm like, I have no idea what he's going to do, not because he's a wild card, but because I don't know what he cares about, feels like a mistake. I will say, I do love how Butcher related Homelander beating his son Ryan to how Butcher and his brother were beaten by their father. I guess it would be more interesting if Billy Butcher didn't already want to kill Homelander as much as anyone has ever wanted to kill anyone before. If we wanted to give him a reason to, that would be a good reason, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. The Ryan stuff I do usually like, but this, and it kind of feels like this with a lot of things this episode, he wasn't part of the team, not because he doesn't want to be, but because the show doesn't want him to be. There's no reason for him to be around the main characters now. So he just decides to leave, and I don't know, it just feels too convenient. Alright, number 6, now we're in ones that I actually kind of didn't like, is Deep and Noir. I just found there's not a whole lot of them. But first of all, I was interested in the idea that maybe Black Noir isn't Black Noir, because he says he's going method and he's not talking, but then it's like, well, maybe that's true, or maybe he's secretly somebody in disguise. And I'm not saying that, like, I have a theory and they didn't do it, but it's just like, apparently the whole reason he wasn't talking before for the last 3 episodes is because he is going method and he wants to be a better actor, he wants to put on a better performance. And I just felt underwhelming. I'm glad we're able to see Nathan Mitchell again because I like him. I like the idea of this character. But it just seemed like they were setting up something interesting that they didn't do anything with. And yeah, I really like the Deep, and I just think this episode didn't have anything really interesting for him to do. Him doing a podcast is fine, but I feel like when all the other characters have either moved on to taking over religion or trying to find the virus that's going to kill all the superheroes, the idea of like he's doing a Manosphere podcast, something that's so kind of inconsequential that Starlight is able to sit down with her brother who totally thinks she's part of a cabal of secret evil people, and she's able to unbrainwash him immediately, makes me go, oh right, the Deep isn't very good at this. And it's like funny, but it's also, why are we spending so much time with a character who's not very good at this? And listen, I'm not going to pretend that him saying
It's a dog-eat-dog world
isn't really funny, but just what they were doing this episode didn't feel like it mattered. It just kind of felt small compared to everything else that was happening. And I realize now I didn't really talk about Oh Father and everything that was going on with that plot line, mostly because it just seems to exist to elevate the Homelander plot line. There's some jokes that The Boys makes that I'm like, that's a pretty funny, clever joke, and I like it. There's other jokes that The Boys makes that are so heavy-handed and so obvious and so stupid that I like it. I don't know if Hay, the guy that says he's really religious, is actually into a lot of freaky sex stuff. It's such an obvious, heavy-handed joke that it loops around to being funny. I don't think it is. I will say, I think Daveed Diggs was very funny in it.
Ain't no ball gag in the world strong enough.
Great line. I love that Ashley calls her like second personality back Ashley. But like, I don't know. I don't think we need to put this under Oh Father, say like, here's why you should go along with Homelander's plan, because he just would. So that was fine. But all that was better than the number 7 plot line. And this is maybe one of the worst things I feel like this show has done in a while. and that is all the Vought Rising stuff. Now, I watched this show every week. I've seen every episode. I watched all the Gen V, RIP Gen V, although it did seem like it was kind of not going to last that much longer than the boys, so like this feels right. I'd like to see those kids again. I'm kind of tired of hearing about this cool superhero team that actually you just missed them and they were doing really cool stuff, but oh, they're gone, and hopefully you'll see them next time, especially considering just how powerful some of them are. But like, I'm pretty clued in on what's going on in the show. As we got to Fort Harmony, and Soldier Boy and some of these other characters started using new names, I'm like, oh no, this is Soldier Boy backstory stuff. We are not watching this because it is interesting now, or because it has anything to do with the end game of the series. We are watching it because we are going to meet all of these wonderful characters in Vought Rising, a new show that I am genuinely very excited for, because I think the idea of these characters is super funny. Like, I think the idea of a story set in the 50s, with 50s-y versions of these heroes, is going to be great. But, like, I don't think The Boys needs to stop dead in its tracks in the middle of the last season to just introduce a bunch of names that we have never heard. I do imagine we are going to meet Bombsight, but, like, who the hell is Quinn? And like, why are we learning about characters that only really matter to Soldier Boy? Like, even Bombsight, we have so many characters, so much stuff is happening. The idea that we are going to introduce new supers, and it seems like the only reason they are here is to set up another spin-off show, feels like such a mistake. Like, even mentioning Stormfront again and talking about her, part of me was like, well, maybe we'll see her this season, so like, that's why they're setting her up. Part of me, as that began, was like, oh, but are they just doing this because she's going to be in that Vought Rising show and they want to like remind us, oh, they know each other? And it's like, no, it's so much worse. These characters are just going to use names of characters we don't know. Like, that's not how The Boys usually does this. The way an episode of The Boys usually works, especially when there is a new soup, like who Bombsight would be, is we will hear about them in the beginning of the episode, and then by the end of the episode, we will have met them. But in this case, it just feels so disorganized. And this whole trip, this whole episode, mostly this whole plot line, feels like it exists to set up Vought Rising. And I'm not saying like, oh, boys, you're better than that. Also, I like the Marvel movies. I appreciate a good like sequel tease or something like that. But so much of what happened in this episode felt so redundant. So many relationships are just spinning their wheels, and we have so little time left that any time we're spending on anything but moving the plot forward and getting to the end of these character arcs feels like a mistake. You know, I don't think someone should do this necessarily, and obviously if you're watching this video, it's too late. I'd be curious if someone could just skip this episode completely. What this ultimately was like a little scavenger hunt to find the V1. And they went to where the V1 was, and instead of it being there, they went, oh, it's probably over there. And then they're going to this new place. But like, they didn't learn anything new. It just feels like you could completely skip this step and everything would be fine. I don't know. If you liked it, let me know, because I'm curious where people fall on this. But this just felt, I don't know, unnatural for The Boys in a way that I don't think that show usually has a big problem with. Here's what it is, you know, this is the problem. We've seen a lot of Homelander's life, but we haven't seen all of it. Homelander is the antagonist. Learning more about Homelander at this point is interesting. Soldier Boy is not the antagonist. He's not the hero. We know a fair amount about him. We've seen plenty of flashbacks of his life. So the fact that we're spending time this season learning more about Soldier Boy instead of Homelander, that feels like a mistake. Have this be a place Homelander knew or was familiar with. You know, related somehow to this religious story. I don't know. But just, yeah, something other than this. In conclusion, that was the part I didn't like. The part I did like was Annie and her family and pretty much everything Homelander was doing, especially all the God stuff. I think this episode was funny, was watchable, but it was the first time in a while that I've watched an episode of The Boys and gone, oh, I could have just totally skipped that. And that's not good, because this isn't an anthology. Like, this is supposed to be telling a complete story. Yeah, speaking of anthologies, that reminds me of a video I watched recently about one of the creators of one of the most iconic anthologies of all time, probably the most iconic anthology of all time, Rod Serling, who created the Twilight Zone. It's the first episode of the Showrunner series, created by Captain Midnight, where Captain Midnight looks at a showrunner, looks at their history, their philosophy, and how that informed a television show that we all either love or at least know. And you can watch that video, along with all of my videos, early and ad-free, and tons of other exclusive videos, on this video sponsor, Nebula. Nebula is, say it with me, a subscription streaming service that I and a bunch of other really cool people helped create. Nebula has evolved so much over the last 7 years. Sure, you can still watch all my videos early and ad-free. You can watch videos by a bunch of other creators you probably already love. But one of the most exciting things about Nebula is our original programming. Tom Scott has a new series called England, where he goes to every English county to find something interesting. You should check out this first episode where Tom Scott goes to Leicestershire and he visits a bell making factory. You see the entire process, learn how bells are made, and it is not how you would expect, especially since this bell making factory is hundreds of years old and they're still working with some of the same techniques from a century ago. Tom Scott even gets to use a sledgehammer to break one of the bells a little, because shockingly, it's hard to do. It's hard to use a sledgehammer to break an enormous bell. And each episode of England is going to be on Nebula for a week before it goes anywhere else. On top of that, we got a series that I love watching called Abolish Everything, where someone, maybe a comedian, maybe another YouTuber, makes an argument for something that should be abolished. They state their case, they make a very funny PowerPoint, the political establishment gets to weigh in, and then the audience decides what deserves to actually be abolished. This week they did the championship for the second season. They had a ton of really funny people on it. I've never been on that show, maybe sometime in the future. I think I'd be a fun abolitionist. And then later this year, although hopefully not too much later, Nebula's first original dramatic scripted series, Subliminal, comes out with the episode that I wrote, which I cannot wait for you guys to watch. Nebula is the best way to support all of the creators you already love and all the creators you don't know you're going to love, but then you're going to love them when you see them on Nebula. You can also download the videos to your phone, which saves you data when you're not at home. And there are not AI videos on Nebula, so this isn't going to be like YouTube where you go on and you watch a video in a minute or two and you're like, something's off here, and then you realize like, oh, this video is AI. Which happens on YouTube and other platforms way more than I would like to admit. Nebula, we all got real stuff made by real creators, and that's why it's great. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year, $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year of Nebula for just $30. That is $2.50 a month. It is an amazing deal. Again, go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut to check it out. That's all I got. Stay safe, everybody. I'll see you next week.